in 68 and 69, we, won the championship. But then in 73, I went to work for LG DeWitt. And then in 75, he won Benny won the Daytona 500. And out of an engine I wouldn't give you $200 for.
Yeah.
But there's a lot behind that.
That's the other thing I was reading about the engine you were talking about. It was put together with a bunch of almost scrap part kind of stuff.
Well, it was at Riverside. That was the first race of the year, and somebody gave him a box of pistons. He come to me, tickled to death, Benny was. He said, "I got a set of pistons." I looked at him. I said, "Drag race pistons. That's quarter mile. We run 500 miles." He said, "Yeah, but the guy says they'll work." Okay. Went to the shop, back to Taylor and built the engine. And I said, "We need to build another one. We can't afford another one." So I go then in 74 when we blowed up all those engines. I go through all the old used parts, and finally found enough to put a engine together, which I wouldn't give you $200 for when I got through it. And we go to Daytona, and the second lap, he blew that engine up, the new one that we built pistons out. But anyway, blew it up, and they put that old engine in. And, we qualified with it. We practiced with it, run the 125. We started it, and we fell out of it. Here we are going to run the 500 with it. Come down next to the end, and he's running second, and David Pearson in the Wood Brothers car, he spins out, and we end up winning the race. And that was the miracle that we won that race. But I had to go to teardown, make sure the cubic inch was right, and I said, well, to start with, that's 366, then it went to 358.
Oh.
And I'm thinking, what crank is that in that thing?
Oh, man, yeah.
So anyway, I went to teardown, and it was okay, but whenever I seen somebody win that race, I had no clue, no human possible way that they was going to win that race, not the Daytona 500.
Yeah.
But
That's a great
was
story.
one day that LG DeWitt and Benny Parsons was the happiest two people I've ever seen.
I'll bet so. And they got by with a good budget too on that.
No joke.
The cheapest engine ever winning the Daytona 500.
Ask Waddell if the big block or small block was funner to work with.
Well, I loved the big block, especially the Ford when we had 2 4-barrels. Back in '68, we was able to run that one year against the Hemmies. And that's when Pearson won the championship with that particular engine. But the small blocks, I'll never forget the first one we built, and I think it's in '74, and put it on the dyno, and it wouldn't make 500 horsepower. I was sick, and zero torque, basically. But then we went to work, and it was pretty soon, we had 600 horsepower, then we had 700, then we had 800, it just kept going.
So is that how the evolution of the race engine in NASCAR was? I mean, because when I got in, it was like the compression was 14-1, and then they cut it back to 12-1, and I think around 96 maybe. And so, you went from the dome pistons, and we'd cut them down, and then we had hollow domes. So anyway, another story. But we went to 12-1. But it's because the power kept going up and up and up. And then, of course, you had the Fords who were spanking everybody back in that time. In the mid-90s, I guess. So they would just give them more spoiler, a longer, taller spoiler, that kind of stuff. But my question is, back in the 60s and the 70s, and I guess into the 80s, where did they cap and how did they cap off the horsepower numbers?
Well, there wasn't no compression rule back then. I'd always pump them up. They had different ways of doing it. Cutting the heads, the block, the piston domes that you used. There was so much involved in pistons, even back in the 60s.
1968, whenever you were there with Ralph Moody, in one of the pictures in the book, there's a picture of a piston. He's holding a piston, and you're there with him, right behind him, and the piston's got a big dome on it.
Right.
Okay.
That's how you got compression out of that dome.
Yeah.
But there was so many ways, doing it back in the days, And I can remember we had a flow bench at home in Moody. It was a big GM blower on it. If you got your hand over the suction of it, it probably sucked you in it.
Wow. Okay.
But I learned so much working with the flow bench, working back then on the intakes and the carburetors and all.
And for our listeners that don't know, a flow bench is the modern ones is the ones I'm used to working around, and it was an actual bench that had a it would blow or suck air through intake manifolds or cylinder head ports, and you can measure the amount of flow through it. So how was yours set up back then?
I forget how we had it set up now. It's been so long.
Yeah.
But I know you could work on turbulence and make sure you got the airflow straight and not tumbling. You didn't want reversion in the engine. So there's a lot of areas you could work on there. Yeah. And camshafts naturally played a big part in it too. No we'll tell how many thousand camshafts I tried.
I'm sure.
But it's always trial and error, and you always take and build an engine. The next one you're going to try to make it better than that one, and that's it. Just kept progressing on.
Yeah, I know one of the stories was about Tracy's grandfather, Willie Thompson, back in the Schumann and Thompson days in Charlotte. Whenever he'd get a cam and take a file to it, and basically custom make the cam with a file.
I've heard of those stories, but I can't imagine it. That's the wildest thing I've ever heard of. But I've heard it, and they certainly told it for the truth, so I believed them. But that was some rough doings.
Yeah, that's tedious, isn't it? It's like
very much so.
Take forever. So you get one load, and then you got to go to the next, and you got like 14 more. Oh, so you didn't work on any Chryslers. You always worked on the Fords and
Chevrolet
and Chevrolets. Yeah.
No, I don't know. I just didn't have no desire to work on the Hemis.
Yeah.
Those Dodge Hemis. I'd always looked at them as big, heavy engines.
Yeah. I'm with you there. I understand. So one of the coolest engines, I guess, around was that 427. And then you had the 429.
Yeah, 429, I didn't like it.
Okay. Yeah.
No, that was not an easy engine to build. It took half a day just to trace the rod bolts and whatever.
Oh, I've heard about they're different on those 429s. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't stay around long, and I'm glad they went away.
Yeah. Did you ever get to run the 460s? I'm just curious.
Well, couldn't go past 430, so
okay.
That reason went down to 460s.
Okay. All right.
But I remember the year that I built for the Wood Brothers in '72. That was what I built for them that year. It was a 429 with a sector plate on it.
All right.
But that's what AJ won the Daytona 500 in, and later on that was the first part of the season, and then Pearson got in and won whole, I don't know how many races he won the rest of that year.
So is that car, the replica of that car, still around? It was red and white.
Yeah.
And I believe they brought that by Roush Yates Engines years ago. Leonard Wood brought it in, the car. And if I'm not mistaken, that might be the one that had I think it might have had a trap door to see the tire wear. You remember that being in that?
Yeah, you done that at dirt tracks places, it's where you could see the tread, and then they got away from it. But
okay. And Tim Flock had the Jocko Flocko,
the monkey, yeah.
Yeah. And the monkey
What'd
went.
you think about that?
Yeah.
Having a monkey as a passenger.
That was pretty much a publicity stunt, I suppose. But it was pretty funny, especially whenever Jocko went crazy when he pulled that flap and saw the tire moving, and then just went nuts inside the car and cost Tim Flock the race.